Hello, my name is Reuwsatt, and first off I want to thank you for buying this DVD. I hope you pick up some tips and techniques out of it that I use on my trap line for snaring coyotes. Secondly, I want to talk about the title of the DVD, The Great Equalizer, and what I mean by that is trapping coyotes is a lot of fun and it's very effective, but when you set snares out on your line, you can capture a lot of additional animals that you wouldn't catch otherwise. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of areas where you go into and you think, wow, this is a great area for coyotes. How do I narrow that down? How do I pick that perfect point? Well, a lot of those spots don't allow for a trap to be placed, or they're too vast. You can't put enough traps in there to cover it. You know, it'd take too much equipment to do that. When you're trapping with snares, it allows you to cover a lot of country, you know, because you can set, 12 or 15 snares in a draw, where you wouldn't be able to do that with leg holds. It wouldn't be cost effective. But when you're using snares, they're a lot less expensive than traps, and they are very effective at capturing and killing coyotes. And that's something that I set on my trap line. I use a lot of snares along with my leg holds. And another benefit to those snares is, regardless of the weather, they're working. If we get snow and then a rain and it freezes, that snare is still working. If we get the wind and it's just, like out here in South Dakota, it's very common to have 40, 50 mile an hour winds. And that's hard for the scent in your dirt hole to work when the winds are that strong. I mean, don't get me wrong, the scent still definitely works in the dirt hole, but you got to make sure you're spot on with your location finding, with finding the locations to put your sets in to capture those coyotes in the wind. Where if you've got your snares in the trails, you're set at the right height, and you have them somewhat blended in the trails, you're going to capture that coyote. Even though he didn't smell your dirt hole, you're still going to capture that coyote with a snare. And I promise you this, running snares will add a lot of fur to your shed at the end of the year that you wouldn't otherwise have. And that's why I am a huge advocate of snaring along with your leg holds. Leg holds are my primary focus on my trap line, but I definitely do run snares along with my leg hold. This snaring video will show you how I add fur to my line and where those situations are that I'm going to use those snares, because I have places that it just does not work to have leg holds in my line. And it's a matter of hauling equipment, where I got to hike a half a mile into a draw to set traps, to haul the traps and the dirt and the bait bucket down. It's a whole lot easier to haul 12 or 15 snares down there and some extensions and hang snares and capture that fur. The snaring probably accounts for, I would say, a strong 30% of my catch every year on coyotes. And when I'm talking about 400 coyotes, we're talking about a lot of coyotes that those snares add to my trap line. And just think, even if you're only catching 15 or 20 coyotes, which is a great accomplishment, if you can hang snares and catch 30% more of your annual catch, you're talking about a pretty significant number of animals at a minimal cost to you. And there are things that you really need to look at, and there are things that I look at on my trap line, because if I have a certain amount of steel or traps that I use on my trap line, and by running snares, I can add a lot of opportunities to my line that I wouldn't have. And there's the weather is a huge one that puts leg holds out of business for me. When the snow comes and the wind comes and the drifting starts, and I know that I'm going to have to dig out my traps, and I'm mentally thinking that, geez, the next 3 days are going to be tough because we had 6 inches of snow and a 40 mile an hour wind, and my traps that are set on the northwest side of the trail are going to be drifted in, and I got to dig them out. This is where the snares really come into play, because they're putting fur in the truck even on the days when you don't anticipate catching fur. Another thing is, day in and day out, snares add fur to your line, especially in high competitive areas. One thing you need to keep in mind, if you can run your dirt holes along with your snares in these areas, but if you're running snares, you're going to catch that elusive dog that's avoiding the dirt hole, that's smelt that scent in that hole before. Because this is a blind set. This is a true blind set. He has no idea what he's walking through. You're going to catch that elusive animal that refuses to work a dirt hole, and you're going to get him in a snare. Another thing is, in those high competitive areas, where there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of public access, a snare puts that animal down. He's dead. he's laying there dead. He's not bouncing around in a leg hold, so you're reducing your theft a little bit by using snares. You're going to keep some of those extra animals in those more obvious places because you put him down, he's dead, he's not fighting. You know, if you can use some brush to hide that animal in a snare, if you're using a dispatch snare, you're going to put him down and he's going to be tucked in behind the brush, and you're going to keep that animal versus having that animal in a leg hold bouncing around. So, you know, in those situations where you're trying to hide an animal, a snare is a great situation. If you can't use a dispatch snare, but you can have entanglement, you can accomplish the same task with entanglement. Entanglement causes dispatch of the animal. So snares are definitely a strong focus on my trap line, but I am still primarily a leg hold trapper, but I do run a lot of snares because it's added fur at the end of the year. It definitely pays to run these snares. What we've got here is we've got ourselves a real nice coyote that we snared in the fence line on this creek crossing here, and had a spot narrowed down over here with this extension. And as you can see, he's got the brush all tangled up over here. And the reason he's on an extension way over here is because I've got a snare just to the left of us here. And I put him on that extension so that I could keep this snare working over here because I wanted to slide him that way. I don't think we've had this coyote caught very long at all. As you can tell, he's still alive. And he is on a dispatch snare, and that's one of the reasons I don't think he's been caught real long. I do want to get him dispatched right away here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this location here. Alright guys, like I said, we're snaring in the fence. We've got a great draw. We're actually at the head of a dam here, and there's a lot of travel that happens in these areas at the heads of these dams. There's generally a lot of country up here that's filling this. And they're great places to set snares. I've actually got about a half a dozen snares set up on this upper end, but I've got 3 that fences off everything that comes through right here. I've got this one here, I've got one over here in the buckbrush, and the one that this coyote got caught on. And we'll take this brush and I'll narrow this back down. I'll set this snare right back where we had it again, and I really have a high expectations of catching more coyotes here. Not only that, when we set this, there was a really big tom track that had come through this draw, and I'd really like to pick up that cat because it's a big old tom track. But this is a nice, really nice pale coyote, white bellied, and this is a great animal to capture here. And we'll go ahead and I'll get this fence back off, and I'll show you some video of the final set here when we're done. As you can see, I got this whole fence fenced off with some old rotten brush, which will force them into these little openings to come through the fence, and that's what we're really looking for here. We want to make that coyote go where we want him to go so we can catch him, and he's not going to go through this brush. So we got a real good chance of getting a coyote or a cat when they come through this creek bottom on that opening or this opening here. So make sure you fence it off real tight. I know that it looks man-made or whatever, but it is, and that's all right. We're trying to tell that coyote where to go. We want him to put his head through our snare so that we can capture him and take him home. So fence it off really good, and you got a good chance of catching that coyote when he comes through. And I looked over my extension here. Here's the extension, and the extension's in great shape. It's not frayed at all. So we'll reuse that extension here. I'm just going to grab a new snare here, and again we're going to use another dispatch snare here. I think if a guy would have came here a couple hours later, that coyote would have been dead and a guy wouldn't have had to shoot it. So these things are really effective at putting those coyotes down. Now, being we've already got our extension wrapped around the tree, we're just going to grab a quick link here, and we're going to connect that snare to our extension with a quick link. We'll just put that through our old swivel on here. We're going to tighten that all the way down. Now we are going to have to take and put a new piece of 9-gauge wire on there. I can't find that old piece in the mess here. So I'm going to cut a fairly lengthy chunk of this 9-gauge wire here. I'm going to go ahead and use this piece of brush here as my snare support. Maybe I'll have a little bit better luck finding it next time. Then we're going to take our snare. We're going to set our loop. Grab our whammy. Slide our whammy over our 9-gauge wire. And we're going to set this right in our opening here. We want to blend it in, and we want it set in there just perfect where it fills that opening, just like that. And we're going to check our height here with our fencing pliers. And on this one here, guys, we're basically right at the bottom of the loop. We're going to raise that up just a little bit, and then we're going to have to readjust. So we're inside our opening. And I can fit 2 fingers above those fencing pliers there now, guys. So that's a good setting there. We want to make sure we're, oops, move that back over. Going to check our height again. We got 2 fingers above the pliers again, and now that's about perfect. That's where we want that. We're not going to worry about this cable hanging over here. It blends in real well with the debris around us, and we should be able to capture another coyote here with any luck. And we're going to head on down the trail and see what else we can find today. All right, guys, we've got ourselves a really nice looking coyote here. As you can see, we've got him in a snare, and what we've got here is a pretty good situation for a snare. As you can see, I've got really tall grass here. This pasture hasn't been grazed yet this year, and what it allows you to do is put snares in here and really blend them in with the grass. And then we've got another thing going on here. We've actually got probably about an 8-foot cut bank right next to the river here. And then there's actually 2 pretty faint trails here that run along this river's edge. This is a second coyote I've snared here. The other one was on this other trail off to the south here. But it really allows a perfect blend of that snare in the grass. They don't see it at all. It's a great situation to put them in there. You want to make sure when you put that snare in these trails like this, especially when they're just pushing their head through the grass, that you've got your height right on your snare. And when I'm talking about your height right on the snare, when I'm setting my snares in the grass, I'm taking my fencing pliers and I'm sticking 3 fingers on top of those fencing pliers, and the bottom of my loop is touching the top of my finger, and that's how I'm setting those snares. So when these guys are traveling, they're going to walk right through that, put their head right through, and they're caught before they even know they've gone through it. And it's just a great deal. This coyote here is caught on a 3/32 cable with a Sherlock lock on it, and this is not a dispatch snare that I put up here. As you can tell, he's still live. One thing I want to caution you on: when you walk up on these coyotes, especially in the dark, the first thing you want to check is make sure that that cable's not frayed at all. Make sure that you've got a good catch on that coyote, and you're not going to lose it with a frayed snare on a couple of tugs. When I came up on this coyote, that's the first thing I did, was check that cable. It's real important, because if it is frayed, you want to get him shot just as quick as you can, so you don't lose that animal, or you don't have he doesn't have the opportunity to take a lunge and get you. So we'll go ahead and dispatch this coyote here, and then we'll go ahead and reset this. But what we're going to do, he's got the grass beat down right here. We're just going to go probably right back where the camera's at. We'll actually move that a little bit and stick it in the tall grass right there where he goes in, so that we can blend that snare in again. We'll pull that rebar stake out of the ground if we can get it out. If we can't, I'll leave the cable on it so it's easier to find, and then I'll pull it later on with a puller. But we'll go ahead and dispatch this coyote real quick. And guys, something else I want to mention here, there's actually 5 snares on this trail, and then I've got 3 on this trail over here. And I do that because you can catch multiple coyotes, and also if the deer happen to come through, knock that snare down, or the wind blows it down, just anything that happens, you want to have multiple opportunities in these high traffic areas like this. And again, the multiple catches is a great opportunity with snares, and they're relatively inexpensive to put up, so I don't mind putting quite a few up at a location, especially when you have the chances to catch these great coyotes. So I think he's done here. We're just going to check this real quick here. This cable isn't frayed at all. We've got a perfect neck catch. The cable is going around right here on his neck, which that's a really good neck catch, and that's right where you want to get him. This is a nice male coyote, and we're going to go ahead and get in our box here, and we'll cut that cable off his neck. And again, I carry a pair of cable cutters with me in my snare box here, so I can cut these cables off, especially if you have a real bad entanglement situation where you've got them tangled around a tree or a fence or something, where you really need to get in there and get it cut to even get him out of the snare. So now we've got that cut. We're going to go ahead and put the parts in the box here so we can reuse those at a later time. One thing too, when you're snaring, guys, when you pound your stake in the ground, make sure that you leave a little bit of your washer exposed on top so that your swivel swivels freely. The last thing you want is your cable binding and then your swivel not working, because then you'll have a situation where they actually unravel the cable, and then you'll lose that coyote because he unraveled the cable, and the cable gets weak, and then you don't hold him, and that's not a great situation for you. And again here, guys, we've got a wolf fang driver we're going to use. We're going to use that 24-inch rebar stake, but I want to emphasize here that you really can get away with an 18-inch. You don't need a 24-inch when we're snaring these coyotes if you've got fairly decent soil conditions. This isn't a situation like a leg hold where they've got a short chain and they're jumping and they're pumping it straight up right at the stake. We've got them on this is actually, I believe, an 84-inch cable. We're going to give them some room with this cable so they can really get a good lunge and tighten that cam up and choke themselves down, so they don't have the leverage when you're snaring. So you can get away with a shorter stake, and you can get away without having to use an earth anchor. I will use an earth anchor like a wolf fang when I've got real soft soil conditions, or I feel like they can get up straight up. Like if I was snaring on the bottom of this cut bank here next to the river, I would definitely use an earth anchor in that situation, because if they got up top, they would have the leverage on that stake. But with this situation on flat ground and this tall grass, they're not going to get the leverage on us. So another thing I want to talk about is we're going to put our stake off to the side of where we're going to put our snare. And the reason we're going to do this is when we drive our 9-gauge wire in for our snare support, I don't want that next to this rebar stake, because what happens sometimes, guys, if you're snaring and you're putting your support wire right next to the top of your rebar, sometimes that snare with that 9-gauge wire will get tangled up around the top of your stake, and then you'll lose the swivel action, and then you'll end up losing your coyote because you have a snare cable break. So make sure, guys, when you're putting your support wire in, you're putting that in away from your stake so that you don't have that entanglement there on your swivel. Swivels are very important when snaring here. So we're going to go ahead and cut a piece of 9-gauge wire here. 9-gauge wire cut. Now we're just going to bend a U in the bottom of our 9-gauge wire here, guys. Just a simple U like that. Now we're going to take our driver. We're going to put that in the edge of the cuts on there. And now we're going to drive this down into the ground. Okay, we've got our support wire in. Put our tools away. Now we're going to take our snare here, guys. We're going to give ourselves a loop. Here's our loop. We don't want to make that loop real large. We don't want them to get a front leg through there. We want a good neck snare. I'm going to push our whammy onto the end of the 9-gauge. I'm going to pull our wire off to the side, our cable off to the side. And get some of this grass out of the way of this loop so it's somewhat clear. And now, guys, remember I talked about our spacing. We've got our fence and pliers. I'm going to set those on the ground. We've got them on the ground, and I've got 3 fingers on top of those fence and pliers, guys. This is a great height for snaring coyotes. It'll help eliminate that hip snare. It'll help eliminate getting that front arm in, because we're getting them at head height right now. And as you can tell, this snare blends in pretty well here. We're going to position some of this grass a little bit around our stabilizer, and we're good to go here. Pretty simple. They're real quick, and they're very effective on catching coyotes. So we'll go ahead and get our coyote and get on down the trail. All right, guys, this is a great spot for a snare here. We've got a nice trail right next to a creek, and this is a spot that I snare year after year. This is actually on an extension here, so it allows us to use this spot year after year. This is a spot where I actually came in early in the season and preset this, so the snare is already attached to the tree on an extension. I've got a swivel here at the end of the extension, and then I've got my 9-gauge wire right here. So all we've got to do is just come in and hook our whammy on here. And we'll just adjust our 9-gauge wire here to where we've got that fence and pliers and 3 fingers underneath here. I don't have my fence and pliers with me at this particular moment, but that's about perfect right there, and it's right in line with the trail. You can see it's pretty well blended in we got the brush here, and then we'll just go ahead and pull this branch over here a little bit, and that'll force that coyote or cat that comes through this location to come right through this snare. And with this blending that we've got going in here, he's not going to see it. And this isn't a dispatch snare here, but we've got entanglement with the trees, so we're going to have a dead coyote or cat when we come back to this location after they travel through here. So look for these nice tight spots like this. Look for these trails along these creeks. The animals run these trails along these creeks, guys. Look for these spots, great spots to add fur to your line. And this is also one of those spots that we're right next to the creek. The ground is constantly wet, so when it gets cold, running leg holds here is tough. The ground's going to freeze, and you're going to be fighting frozen traps, so this is just one of those spots on your line. Look for it, use some snares, and collect the fur. All right, guys, this is one of those spots I want to talk about. We got a lot of country behind us here. How do we narrow that down? We're going to do it with snares today, guys. I've got 1 leg hold down there for a cat set, and there's probably about 15 snares down in this bottom. It allows us to cover a lot of country. We've got a lot of opportunities to catch fur down here, and especially on windy, cold days, those coyotes are going to spend a lot of time down in these bottoms. They get down in these bottoms, they can get out of the wind, they can do a lot of hunting. And what we're going to go over in here is how we're narrowing this down. We're going to show you a lot of footage of some snares that are set in this draw here, and the trail's coming into it. And this is all done on one, quick trip. This is a deal down here where it takes about 15 minutes to hike down in here, check these snares, and get back up to the truck. And it's just something that I want to show you. I'm going to show you every snare I got in here. We're going to do some quick clips of the snares on the trails and show you how we narrow those down. And we're going to start right here on this knob. And we're going to go ahead and turn around here. This is the main travel way in this draw. We've got a dispatch snare right here set right in the trail. It's kind of wide and open a little bit, guys, and that's all right. When it's dark out, we're going to catch a coyote here. And then we've got another one that is blended in with the sagebrush right here. That's set right here in this trail. This is the main travel way out of this draw, and that's why I've got it set. So we've got 2 snares here. Now we're going to head on down into the draw. All right, guys, we're at the Y of the trail that comes down this knob into this bottom, and this is a man-made deal right here. I actually put both of these pieces of brush in here to put this snare in here to cover this trail, because each one of these trails I've got covered here had coyote tracks on it. So I wanted to cover each one of these. And when I set this was muddier than all get out. To fight a leg hold in here would have been pretty miserable. So we've got a snare here. We've got a snare right here in this trail. We've got a snare in this trail. And then I've got 2 more tucked back in this trail over here. And I actually found cat feces back here in these cedars. So we set the snares in here accordingly. I want to touch on one thing here. This snare is put in here with a rebar stake. And the reason I've done that is I've got a snare over here to my right that's on an extension. And if I catch a coyote here or a coyote there, I don't want them tangling up. I want to keep both snares working. So I've got this one on a shorter cable here so I can keep both sets working. So now we'll look down this trail. This is a nice, real nice tight trail here. And we've got 2 snares in on that trail. All right, guys, what these 2 snares in this trail do is they're covering the west side of the main draw. And then we've got a bog in the center of this draw. And now we're going to go to the east side of this draw, and I'm going to show you how we cover that side of this draw. All right, guys, now we're on the east side of that bog, and this is the main trail traveling down the east side. This is where the animal's going to stay dry. They're not going to want to go through that bog. They're going to want to run this cattle trail. So we've got this snare blended in. I mean, this is a great blend in here. That coyote's going to come right through here, plow right through that snare, and we're going to have him caught. And I do have another snare in this same trail on the east side of this bog. We're at that next snare on the east side of this main draw. This is a natural deal here. One thing I want to caution you, when you put this snare in, this is natural debris that's coming out of here. I didn't put this here. This I did put in, and the reason I did that is because if you don't put that in, what you're going to find is that coyote's going to come by here and he's going to bring his nose through here and he's going to brush the snare off to the side. We don't want that. We want to close down this open spot, and it just takes a simple weed like that, and we want that relatively close to the snare. So we force that coyote to put his head through this snare. So make sure you close down those open spots, because he's not going to push through this branch. He'll push through the grass, but he's not going to push through this branch. So make sure that you're directing that coyote's head through here. And another thing, this spot was kind of a tough call for me to put it in here. It's a great spot for a snare, but I'm going to be picking cockaburs out of that coyote when I catch him, because there's a ton of cockaburs right here. But it was the best spot in the trail to put this snare. So if I got to pick a few cockaburs out of a coyote to capture an awesome coyote, that's what I'm going to do, because I want that coyote to go for a ride in the truck. Now what we're going to do is we've actually got a butte that's sitting in the middle of this draw. So it's splitting this main draw. So we got to cover that travel way. And I'm going to go show you how I did that over there real quick. All right, guys, now we're on that butte that kind of separates this main draw. And here's one snare I've got right next to the cedar tree. It's set up on an entanglement situation. So we're going to catch that coyote, and then we're going to draw him back around, and he's going to wrap around the cedar tree, so we'll be able to use this spot again and again. But I wanted to show you this one quick, and now we got a few more down the trail here. All right, Guys, we're back on that butte that separates this main draw. This is another snare that we've got in here on this main trail. As you can see, it's pretty well hidden. I've got another one right here on this main trail, which covers this trail twice, which is great. If you have a snare get knocked down, it gives you an extra chance at him again. And then I've also got one more snare on the secondary trail right here. So we're covering a lot of country here, guys, with a handful of snares. It would take a lot of traps to cover all this country correctly to capture those coyotes. We've still got one more side where we're going to go check a few more snares, and I'm going to show you those as well, because what happens on this butte, it gets real tight on the one side. There's a spring coming down it, and it forces them on the west side. So we set that west side fairly heavy with a few snares, and I'm going to show you those. And then I've got two more snares after that that are going out a feeder draw. And that covers this whole entire area, guys, with like 15 snares. This is about an hour's worth of work setting these in here and 15 minutes to check it. Well worth your time to spend that hour in here for 15 minutes worth of work to collect that fur. And we'll go ahead and we'll head on over to this other side here. All right, guys, this mud that's sticking to my boots is the reason that the snares are the great equalizer. It is tough to keep leg holds working in this environment down here, but it's country you don't want to pass up on your trap line. Capitalizing on snares in this environment is one of the reasons I put up hundreds of coyotes every year. And if you guys run those extra snares on your line, it takes a little bit of extra time, not a lot, you're going to capture that fur as well. All right, guys, now we're on the west side of this butte that separates this main draw. And the nice thing about that butte on this side is it is a nice cut bank right down next to the water, and it doesn't allow them to travel on the direct west side of that butte, so they have to travel on the west side of the creek. And I've actually got about 5 snares right here. There's one here, there's 2 in this draw coming off of the top, and then there's 2 to the left of me here as well that actually come through some low cedar trees, and it covers every travel way into this draw on this side. So with that, you know, not having a leg hold here, we still have every travel way covered. So if a coyote comes through here, as long as a snare isn't knocked down by a deer, or unless he dodges it for some reason, somehow, we're gonna have him hanging here the next time we come. And it's just a great opportunity to catch that extra fur in an area where it's tough to have leg holds working. So we've got this snare, and then we'll pan over here. And I'm just gonna point these out because the lighting in here is really bad. They're hard to see, but there's a trail here, and I have a snare in under the cedar tree, and then there's a snare down here, and I have one on under the cedar tree in there. And those are awesome spots because it's real condensed down, and we're going to capture that animal when he comes through here. And I really have high anticipation of catching not only a coyote in here, but a cat as well. It's a nice thick draw, and the chances of that are good here. All right, guys, here's those other 2 snares I was talking about, and these are coming off of the other top on the west side. And this is the main trail coming in on the west side of this butte, coming off of the other top. And we've got 2 snares in line here, and these are going to pick up those coyotes coming down this trail. And this one actually looks like might be a little low. We're going to raise that up just a hair, and now we're at a perfect hike. One thing I want to talk about here, guys, on inclines and declines, these are great spots to snare deer. You really need to be careful with your snares when you're snaring on inclines and declines. Don't set your loop too big, don't set it too high, because a lot of times you'll get those deer on an incline and a decline. If we were any steeper than this, I wouldn't set here at all, just because the chances of getting a deer would be fairly high, and we don't want to capture those deer, especially on a dispatch snare. These snares are set to break away at 280 pounds on the terminal end, and by the terminal end, I mean this end of the snare. The S-hook will come apart at 280 pounds and release the animal. You know, so if you catch a deer or a an elk or something, the snare is going to break away and release that animal, but the coyote does not break that snare typically. So That's why I have a breakaway setup. That's what our state law is here in South Dakota. We either have to have a deer stop or a breakaway snare, and these are breakaway snares. So hopefully if a guy does snare a deer, the snare is going to come apart and release the animal. When you're using a snare with a deer stop on it, that does not break away, and on an incline or decline that can be a bad thing for the deer. So I definitely advocate for using a breakaway snare on an incline or decline. We got 2 more snares to check, and then that covers this entire drainage, and this is a big drainage, guys. So we'll look at those last 2 snares and go from there. All right, guys, this is a feeder draw coming into that main draw that we've been snaring in, and I just want to show you we got 2 trails coming in here, and I've got a snare on each trail. And what I did, I've got this guy here, and he's on a stake. And then you come over here on this other trail, and I've got this one on a stake too. And the reason these are on stakes, A, I don't have a place to do entanglement here, but B, I needed to separate these 2 snares so when I catch a coyote, he doesn't fire that snare over there. I want to keep that one working or this one working if I catch one. They're far enough apart. This stake is staked forward, and that is as well, but they shouldn't be able to entangle, which allows us to catch one here and possibly catch a double over here. And that's why that's this way. And that concludes this draw, guys. And like I said, snares are great opportunities to catch extra fur, and they allow you to come into a big environment like this and give yourself multiple opportunities in a relatively quick amount of time. So, you know, look for these spots on your line. This is fairly open here. A lot of you guys are going to have timber in your areas, real thick timber through the whole area. You can do the same thing in the timber that I'm doing right here. You know, you can Google Earth, find those draws where the draws come together, where those intersections are, and then go back into that area and look for the trails, you know, deer trails, cattle trails, depending upon what type of environment you have. And you can go in there and you can load it up with snares and you can really add fur to your bottom line. But I just wanted to show you how you take a big drainage and you capitalize on all the travel ways and you cover it with snares. And these guys are going to put fur in the shed. All right, guys, we've got ourselves a snared coyote here. As you can tell, he's been here for a couple of days. This snow came in last night, and he's completely covered up with snow here. And by the looks of it, it's an extremely mangy coyote. I mean, he don't have hardly any hair left on him. So we really did this guy a favor by harvesting him. This is a coyote that probably won't go home at all. But what we've got here is that snare actually was setting right here, and we've got this coyote on an extension, and as you can tell, this cable is wound way up all around this tree, and that's exactly what we wanted. We haven't messed with any of this here, and we're going to be able to put that snare right back where we had it because we had that snare on an extension. What that does is it gets that coyote out of the way, and he tears up the country back over here, and then we get to reuse this location again. So that extension did an awesome job. It's a perfect neck catch. One thing I do want to note is we had another coyote come up behind this location after we caught this one here. You can see the tracks in the snow. Had we had another snare over here, we probably would have had the chance at a double here. And what I've got is I've actually got 4 snares going down along this creek. This is the second coyote that I picked up at this location. Not at this particular location, but on this creek we picked up a couple of coyotes in here now. So we're going to go ahead and cut him out of here. And then we're going to go in and reset this. One thing you want to do, guys, when you're running these extensions after you have a catch is make sure you double check your extension for any fraying so that you don't have a frayed cable, because if you have a frayed cable you're going to have a pretty high opportunity of losing that animal that you do catch, where our extension looks pretty good, and they typically do look pretty good after a catch. So
We'll throw this old cable in our box here. We're just going to set him off to the side. And then what we're going to put back in place here, guys, is we're going to use a dispatch snare. And we'll go ahead and hook on to our extension with a quick link. So we'll grab one of these out of here. Coil those back up, put them away. Just put that through our swivel and then put it through our cable on the other end. So now we're secure here. We're going to check and see if our old snare support is here. We will grab some of these branches out of here and make it a nice easy path for them to walk through. And I don't see my old snare support, so we're going to go ahead and cut another one. Guys, we're going to run this snare support right from the top of this clump of dirt right here. So it just looks like another branch coming in here. We're going to put that U in the bottom of our 9-gauge wire, and then we're going to pound this into the ground. Over into our opening. We're going to make our loop, and then we're going to stick our whammy on our 9-gauge wire. And make sure with these plastic whammies, if you're using those, that you push those in quite a ways, because if you don't, the temperature fluctuations will cause that to fall off. So make sure you get that pushed on there quite a ways. And now we're going to center this in that opening. And like I've said before, we want our fencing pliers underneath with 2 to 3 fingers underneath our snare cable, guys. And that's the perfect height to catch those coyotes by the neck like we've been doing here. And then again, that snare loop, set your fencing pliers up there, and you want about 1 inch of the bottom of your handle past the bottom of your wire, and that's about the perfect size of that loop to capture that coyote. And this is a real quick way to catch them, real effective, efficient way. And we're done here, guys, and we can head on down the trail and see if we can catch some more coyotes today. All right, guys, this is one of those great opportunities that you need to be looking for on your snare line. This is an awesome trail coming out of these cedars. We've got a flat top, which, you know, the prairie comes out and then it comes down through these cedars, and then these cedars are feeding down towards a flat down on the river. So this is a great opportunity, a great travel way for these coyotes. They're coming off the flat, headed to the river to hunt, and it's a great travel way to catch these coyotes on. And when you've got a really nice trail like this coming out of here, it's an awesome place to put a snare. It's a great place to conceal it, and you'll string them up time after time. And you also have a great chance to catch the bobcat right here, because you've got cover coming out off of that flat top. We've got a stack yard down below us, plus we've got, you know, the travel way headed to the river. I mean, this is just a hot spot for coyotes and bobcat. And it's one that you want to be looking for on your trap line when you find an opportunity like this. Hang a snare. It's real quick. It'll take you 30 seconds, you know, a minute. Set a snare in here and be down the trail, and I guarantee it'll be a spot that puts fur up. This is the kind of spot we're looking for on that trail. I mean, there's some other good spots in here when it's pretty tight, but this is a nice tight spot that naturally directs that animal's head over here. And you can actually see on this branch, we've actually got coyote hair up here where they've been coming through and they've been snagging. And that's a pretty cool deal. That tells you that they're using this. This isn't deer hair, and there's no doubt, like here there's a piece of deer hair, but there's coyote hair in here as well. They're using this trail, guys. So we're gonna set this up with a snare. And what we're gonna do, you know, we got this little branch right here that comes across and actually is blocking part of this trail. We're just gonna snap that off right there. So now this is the pathway that they're gonna bring their head through here. They're not gonna bring it over here because they're gonna dodge this right here. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna grab our snare. All right, we've got our snare here, and we're actually gonna anchor our snare away from where we're gonna put our support wire in. We don't want our support wire getting tangled up in our rebar stake and causing the swivel to not work. So we've got our anchor in, and then one thing we're going to do is make sure that our slide here is sliding nice, that it's good and clean, which it is. Now we're going to take our support wire, guys, and we're actually going to take an old Wolfang driver that's wore out a little bit, and we're going to blend that right in with the brush coming up here. Okay, we've got our snare now. Now this is the important part here, guys. We don't need an extremely large loop here. We're targeting coyotes. We can also have the real good chance of picking up a bobcat here. But we're going to stick our whammy on the end of the 9-gauge wire here. And now we got to place that snare in that opening. And what I want to try to get to here, guys, is this height that this snare is sitting in here is very important. All right, now height is very important here on this snare. See how we've got our fencing pliers underneath there? I actually like to have 2 to 3 fingers underneath the bottom of that snare. And what that'll do, guys, is that'll give you a perfect neck catch. Still need a little bit more. Okay, so we've got our fencing pliers in there, and we've got 2 fingers on top of there. That's good right now for this set. And that'll bring that coyote right through here, and we'll get him right by the neck, and we'll have ourselves a dead coyote sitting here with these dispatch snares. You find a spot like this, guys, and those coyotes are going to plow through this every time. This is not a situation where you're going to get a lot of refusals. If you look at the country around it, there's no way around this right here, guys. It's not like you can just bounce out and come around this snare. He's going to plow right through this snare, and you're going to catch the animal that comes through here, whether it's a bobcat or a coyote. All right, guys, I just want to touch on cable restraints real quick. This video, you're going to hear me reference snares and killer snares and dispatch snares and entanglement setups. But I want to touch on cable restraints. I know that a lot of states, that's all you can use is cable restraints, guys. And the same principles apply to cable restraints that apply to snares. And I know that there's a lot of situations where you can't have entanglement when you have cable restraints. But you need to look at what I'm doing with the snares and dispatch snares that I use here in South Dakota and Nebraska. And know that if you look at the terrain that I'm in, a lot of times if you just back out of there a little bit, the application that you have for no entanglement when you're using your cable restraints still apply to the same situations in my areas. You would just have to back off that trail a little bit. Here where we can actually use entanglement or dispatch snares, it's definitely an added benefit as far as
keeping the animal, killing that animal so that he's dead when you get there. Where when you have a cable restraint, the chances are that animal is going to be alive. And one thing I would caution you, where I can get away using a 5/64 cable on a dispatch snare, I would highly recommend that you're using a 3/32 cable with a couple of swivels in line to help keep that animal there. That'd be the one thing I would caution you. But definitely look at the areas that I'm trapping. The trail systems that I use, they still apply to what you're going to be doing with cable restraints. A lot of being successful with snares or cable restraints is picking out those travel ways. If you find those travel ways, it doesn't matter whether you're using a cable restraint or you're using a snare, you're still going to catch that animal. So I just wanted to touch base and let you know that what you're going to see on here still applies to your cable restraint line versus my snare line.
All right, guys, I got another quick tip for you here. We've obviously got ourselves a good coyote here that we just snared, and one thing I like to do right away when I harvest them is I like to cut the snare cable off the coyote's neck. I don't like to leave that on there because when you get back to the fur shed, if for some reason you cut that short right at the base of his neck and you forget that you cut it there, like me, I use a winch to help peel my coyotes back. If you forget, that you've still got that cable around that coyote's neck, when you go put that pressure on it, you have a good chance of popping that fur off this coyote, where he's still got the fur on his head, and you break that entire hide loose. So when you're snaring, definitely out in the field, take a second and go ahead and cut that cable off of his neck so you don't run into a situation when you're putting up your fur that you ruin a coyote because you put too much pressure on pulling the hide off. And that's something I learned the hard way quite a few years ago, and if it helps you in the fur shed, that'd be awesome. So we'll go ahead and get on out of here. All right, guys, as you can tell, we've got ourselves another really nice snared coyote here. Funny thing about this coyote, by the looks of it, it looks like an adult dog. I haven't checked yet, obviously, but I'm talking probably 70 yards down the trail, I just caught a male coyote in a leg hold along the trail that I'm going down with the pickup. And when I was getting ready to harvest him, I noticed that he was, he'd stop and he'd stand up on his hind legs and he was sniffing the air. And I'm actually got carcasses in the back of the truck that I'm bringing back out to the field today, and I thought that's what he was sniffing. But I get up the road here, and here's this nice big dog sitting in this snare right here. And it's kind of ironic because the wind is coming out of the direction that would carry to him, kind of coming out of the northwest today. We got a front coming in, and I'm pretty sure he was smelling this coyote in the snare up here, not me, which makes a lot of sense. And just kind of a neat situation. But this trail right here, I want to talk about this trail a little bit. This is a really grassed in trail with sweet clover and tall grass that hasn't been grazed that hard. And where this trail is coming from is there's actually a set of water tanks back here. And even though it's the dead of winter and those water tanks aren't being used, they still come in and they check those water tanks. It's kind of a habit deal for them, and they do hold some rabbits as well. And we just had a big melt off. Believe it or not, this whole area was drifted in here about a week ago, and with that big warm up, all that snow has melted off. And this is an area that had actually gone dead for me just because the trails were completely snowed in. They weren't using them anymore, and now that it's melted off, I made sure that all these snares were set here again the other day, and we captured this coyote this morning here, plus we captured that coyote in the leg hold just right down the way, which is 2 coyotes just in the last 10 minutes here. So find these trails. If you've got water tanks or maybe a creek coming off a trail and you can find these great, or a creek with the trail intersecting it, they're great locations to be setting snares to capture these coyotes like this. And this thick grass, this thick sweet clover that I've got to work with here is excellent area to conceal a snare and hide it, and increase your opportunity for capturing a beautiful animal like this, because this sure looks like a nice pale coyote, real thick hair. He doesn't look like he's rubbed in the rumps. I've been noticing we're getting a little late in the season here. We're about done trapping the really nice grade A prime coyotes because they're starting to break and rub a little bit. Both of these coyotes that I got here this morning are great coyotes. What we're going to do here, guys, we've got a great location to put in another snare here. We're going to pump this stake out of the ground, and we're just going to move this location back about 5 feet, just right inside the thick grass again. There's no reason we can't reuse this location again. Snare support wire in there. We're going to reutilize that in our stake here. We've got our cable around our coyote here. We'll go ahead and cut him off. Perfect neck catch again, guys. No front leg through there, no hips, just the front neck right where we want them. What I did here is I looked for a nice tight spot in the trail. As you can tell, that's a pretty good tight spot. We're going to force that coyote to come right through here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our snare here. We're going to go ahead and anchor that in the ground, and we're going to kind of anchor that off location a little bit so we can kind of divert having that 9-gauge wire get tangled around in our swivel. There. Now we're going to go ahead and pull our cable through our cam. Go ahead and just grab that real quick. Now we're going to make sure that our cam is sliding freely here, that it's loose on here so it doesn't stick on the cable, because these were dyed, these snares were. We're going to go ahead and take our 9-gauge wire here, our support wire that we used on the previous one, and drive that in the ground. Now we're going to take our whammy here, and again, this is one of those rubber whammies that's on here. It's not a metal whammy. Make sure that you get these shoved on that wire quite a ways so that when the weather changes it doesn't fall off. Now we're just going to stick this snare right in the center of this opening. And then we're going to tuck our cable back out of the way. And this, guys, should catch us another coyote here. Got a lot of hope that we're going to catch another coyote at this location. We caught 2 dogs. Means we've probably got a female running around. Mating season has definitely started here. So this is a great set. Great opportunity to capture another coyote here, and we're gonna head on down the trail, see what else we got, guys. All right, guys, as you can see, we've got ourselves a real nice dog here snared, and the reason the snare is in this location is we've got a real big marsh here. As you can see, we've still got some ice in front of us, and we've had a real nice warm up here where this is thawing in the day and it's freezing at night. And what it's doing is it's forcing these coyotes to come off of the ice and get on these trails on the side, which is what I was looking for The marsh is so big I couldn't snare in the marsh and hold the animal there. So I was snaring on the sides, and with this warm up, it's forced them out of the marsh onto the trails, and we got this beautiful coyote right here. And what I've got is I've got this coyote on a snare with a snare extension, and that snare extension is running onto this trail. And what that does, guys, when you put these guys on an extension, is it actually pulls them off of the trail. Because as you can see, he's tangled up down here in the brush, which this trail that's over here, he hasn't mucked that up at all. All the grass and brush is still there, so we're going to be able to cut him out of here and then go put our snare in the exact same spot we had it before, because he hasn't tore the ground up there. If we had a stake in the ground right here, we'd have to move into a different location, because he'd have that catch circle right there. He'd have all the grass beat down, all the brush beat down, and we may not have the opportunity to use that again. If in your state you're allowed to use an extension to draw that coyote off of the trail and entangle him, it's a great thing to do to preserve your set location. And also, entanglement, they're almost always dead when you get here. They don't have the opportunity to chew on the cable, and they're dead, and that's what we want, is that dead coyote, because a dead coyote's always here when we come get them. So we're going to go ahead and cut him out of here with our cable cutters, and we're going to see if we can't find the end of the extension, because we'll try to use that extension again. He's got this cable frayed real bad right here on what I hope is the snare, and we'll cut that first, and then we're going to pull that out of here, kind of untangle this, and as you can see, it is extremely tangled, and that is exactly what we want. Okay, here's the end of our snare, so we'll cut that. We've got our swivel there. We're going to take that out of there and save that. We'll reuse that at a later time. Now let's see if we can get him out of here. Go ahead and just cut that snare off his neck now. And I'm just trying to be careful here so I don't ruin that extension. I'd really like to reuse that extension again. You can see, guys, here this cable is frayed quite a little, and that's why entanglement is so great, because when they entangle, even though they fray that cable, they basically tie it in a knot, and you're not going to lose that coyote. And it does take just a minute here to get this all sorted out, but then we'll be able to reuse our equipment again. We'll save our deer lock, or not our deer lock, but our lock on our snare. We've got our extension here, and we're just going to inspect that real quick to make sure that we don't have any frayed cable on our extension, which we don't. So we'll reuse this extension. Something else I want to touch on, guys. These are pretty small pieces of brush here. Some of them are even dead. I've got this wrapped around about 4 of these small pieces of buckbrush here, and that's all you need to hold these coyotes. You don't need a big tree when you're snaring these coyotes. A little bit of brush is going to hold them just fine, because they're going to just start tangling around things. As you can tell, he tangled around this, he chewed it off. This tree's gone, this tree's gone. He really worked this one over. Entanglement's a really good deal, and I mean, this is a nice big adult male. Nice white belly on him. That's a great animal, and we get to take him home because of this snare. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab a new snare out of the box here. All right, guys, I just want to show you something. This is the spot that a snare was originally in. This is our 9-gauge support wire right here. This is what I'm talking about when I say you can reuse that spot when you get them on an extension and you get them out of the area so they can fight it out of the area. I mean, this is an awesome tight spot to conceal your snare, and we definitely want to reuse that again. And that extension allows us to do that. So, make sure if you can use entanglement in your state, utilize entanglement, use an extension, get them out of the way so you can reuse your location again. Here in South Dakota, which is where we're snaring here today, we can use entanglement, and we can use an extension. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a quick link to attach our snare to our extension. And we're just going to put our quick link through the loop on the end of our extension, and then we're going to put that through our swivel on our snare. Tighten that up all the way. And then this is a dispatch snare that we're going to put back in place here. 5/64 cable with a cam lock on it. We're going to go ahead and set our loop here. One thing you want to make sure, these have all been dyed. Make sure that your cable slides smoothly before you set that. Don't just set your snare and not make sure your cam's moving smooth, or it's not going to slide the way you want it to. And then we're just going to put our whammy on our 9-gauge wire here, our support wire. Push that on there nice and firm, and we want to make sure that we're centered in our open spot here between our brush, because the brush is going to conceal our snare here. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our fence and pliers, guys, and we're going to measure our snare. We want our snare to be our fence and pliers off the ground and either 2 or 3 fingers underneath the bottom of that snare. And that'll be about the perfect height for that coyote to come travel through here and get his head right through there where we want it. We don't want a front leg. We don't want to grab him by the hips. We want him by his neck, so that we can dispatch that animal. Okay, see that? We got our fence and pliers and right at 3 fingers in there. And that's what we want underneath our snare. This will allow us a perfect catch around the neck on that coyote. And this is what we're looking for. We're going to go ahead and head on down the trail, see if we can catch some more coyotes today. All right, guys, I want to go over one quick tip here that I use when I'm snaring on the ice. Sometimes when you're on the ice, you're going, geez, where am I going to put my snare support? Just a quick, simple thing you can do. Take your 9-gauge wire, cut it at the length you want. Go ahead and put a bend in the bottom here, guys. And then I use a wolf fang driver, an old wolf fang driver that's dry, that's actually worn out a little bit, where the grooves are pretty thick on the bottom versus a new one, because that when it's wore out, that 9-gauge sits on there real nice. And you can take your driver, you can pound your 9-gauge wire right into the ice. And now you've got your snare support right in the ice, and as it gets colder, it freezes in there, and that is a nice solid snare support. And you can bend it whichever way you need to, and that'll last until the ice thaws or the water runs on top. But that's a great way to put your snare support in, and that's just something I do on the trap line here quite frequently on the ice. So you can put your snare support anywhere you want, and then fence it down from there. All right, guys, just another quick thought for you here when you're snaring on the ice. If you don't have a bunch of branches around or whatever, and you need to fence an area down on the ice, you can break off the limbs on cedar trees or just a cottonwood tree or something, and use those to help narrow down your travel way where you want that coyote to go. And one thing I do look for on the creek when I'm snaring a lot of times is I like to be between 2 cut banks where I'm actually recessed down in the creek, because then you've got it narrowed down to say 8 or 10 feet. And then you can come in and you can grab a big branch. You can lay that big branch down across the ice in front of you, and then around your snare, again, you take your wolf fang driver, or even a rebar stake for that matter, will work for this. What we're going to do right here, we're going to pound a hole in the ice, and then we're just going to stick a couple branches right down in the ice. And we can do this on both sides of our snare. Like there, we actually got down into the water. And then we can, position these whichever way we want on the ice, hang our snare here, and then if we put a couple of big branches on the outside, we're going to force that coyote or cat, whichever animal you're targeting, to come right through here. And it's just quick ways to narrow down a crick and force that animal to go where you want him to go. But just if you hadn't thought about it, either, like I said, your wolf fang driver or a stake, you can do a lot with that to help snare on the ice. All right, guys, this is one of those great opportunities I want to talk about here. Snaring on the ice is an awesome situation in the middle of winter. Those coyotes love to run the ice. As you can see, we've got ourselves a nice big dog here in this snare. This would actually be the second coyote caught at this location on the ice. You can tell it's all chewed up in here. The branches are all chewed up, and this is actually the point of travel through here. We've got a piece of 9-gauge wire here tied off to this dead branch right here, which we're actually going to be able to use again here. And what we've got is we've got this coyote on an extension tied off to this tree, and then we've got a dispatch snare set here. And those coyotes will come down, they'll run this ice, and versus going around, they'll just go right through this travel way here. And it's just great places to catch coyotes. I look for these spots, and as you can tell, this is actually a spot where I modified this. I took this dead branch and I pulled that down to the ice here, and I set that down on the ice to narrow this down, which allows us to put a snare in here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use this location again. We'll be able to use this location again and again and again unless this ice thaws. And today we've actually got a warm up here where we got to be in the mid 60s and the ice is melting off. But I think we'll still have good ice here for a little while. So we're going to set this again. And as you can tell, we're in a beautiful draw here. Not only do we have the chance to catch these nice coyotes here, but we could pick up a cat at some point as well because they spend a lot of time on the ice. So we'll go ahead and get that coyote out of here. Like I said, we're using a dispatch snare. When I'm talking about a dispatch snare, guys, I want to show you what we're looking at here. When I'm talking about a dispatch snare, there's no deer stop on this. It closes all the way, and this cam does not relax at all. So as it's tightening, it's not backing off at all. I do use some Sherlocks as well. I try to use them in an entanglement situation so that I'm sure I get a dispatch on it, but sometimes like with a Sherlock, it'll back off a little bit and relax. I don't want the lock to relax. I want that animal dead when I get here. That's the situation I'm looking for. And in our state, even though it's a dispatch snare, we do have to have a swivel on the other end. So I do have a swivel, but a lot of times when you're using a dispatch snare, you don't have to have that swivel on the end because you want it dead when you get there. But these are highly recommended. I highly recommend a dispatch snare if you can use them in your state. But I just wanted to show you the setup I'm using here, so it's something you can look at and decide whether you want to use it or not. This is a 5/64 cable that I'm using here, which is a thin cable. It blends in real well with your surroundings, and with a dispatch snare, you can get away with that 5/64 cable versus using an 1/8" cable. If I'm using a Sherlock, I definitely use the 1/8" cable, or not the 1/8" cable, but the 3/32 cable. So we'll go ahead and get this coyote out of here, get him untangled, and we'll go ahead and reset this. Okay guys, I got my cable untangled here. We're just going to set him off to the side, get him out of the water. We'll get that snare off him at a later point here. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to use a quick link here. And as you can tell, I've got an old swivel on here from a previous catch. But we're going to use a quick link, and we're just going to put that through the loop of our extension.
And then we're going to unwind this, and then we're going to go ahead and hook our quick link to our snare, to our swivel. We're going to go ahead and close that all the way. And this is one, make sure you get her closed all the way, guys. You don't want to lose a coyote because you don't have that closed all the way. And so we're going to throw that back over here. And now we're going to set our loop, guys. We want a nice round loop, and that's something with these dispatch snares and this 5/64 cable. You get a nice round loop. You don't get that teardrop that you sometimes get when you're using that Sherlock that I've used before. And we're going to go ahead and set that on here on our 9-gauge wire, our snare support. Now we're going to center that in this hole again, and we're going to tighten this up just a little bit. Break that off. We want a nice clear path through the snare. And now, as a gauge here, for our distance on our height, we're going to go our fencing pliers, and we're going to get 2 to 3 fingers above those fencing pliers. And that'll allow us that perfect neck stare we're looking at. So we've got 2, we can almost fit 3 under there. I'm going to leave that just like that. That's the height I want that snare at. And then as far as loop size, guys, make sure you're checking your state regs when you're setting your loops. Some states have a maximum loop size, but when I'm looking at that, this is my fencing pliers in my loop. It's almost as big as my fencing pliers, but I want you to just look at that and keep that as a reference for, I guess on the top of my head, I don't know what that exact measurement is. I guess I've never measured it. It's just a size that I try to set those loops. But look at those fencing pliers, and I've got probably about an inch short of my fencing pliers. So that's what you want to look for when you're setting your snare. And this set's done, guys. We'll be able to catch more and more coyotes here, and we're going to head on down the trail and see if we can get some more. All right, guys, I got a quick tip for you here. As you can see, this snare is almost touching the ground, and what we had happen here is we had a warm up here, and when I put the snare support in, the ground was frozen, and now that ground has thawed, and this snare support is just leaning over in that wet mud on top now. So what we need to do to accommodate for that is we need to check all of our snares when we have a warm up like this. In case our snare supports go down like this, we need to be able to drive them back in the ground a little bit deeper so they support that snare appropriately. Because if we were to leave that like that, just walk by and not check on a warm up like this, you're not going to have a snare working here, and you'd have a pretty good potential to miss some good fur that comes by here. So just a quick tip, even though the weather is nice, you need to make sure you're checking these snares, and if you have a snare support like that goes down, fix it real quick. It only takes just a second, and then you'll have that opportunity to catch the fur that comes by. If you don't, if a guy gets lazy and doesn't check these types of things, you're gonna miss fur on your line, guys, and you don't want to do that, especially on nice weather like this. They're gonna move good. So just a quick check on your snare supports, make sure they aren't sagging, and fix them real quick. It doesn't take a lot of time, like I said. And now we're gonna head on down the trail. All right, guys, I want to talk about this coyote right here. These snares I just put in the ground here 3 days ago. It's a spot where I've had some traps, and I wasn't having a lot of success with those traps. I have caught a couple in here, but first day in here checking these snares, we've got one coyote in here that I see so far. And one thing I want to touch is, you see these trails. I've got a trail. There's trails all the way across the bottom of this dam. Every single one of these trails has got a snare on it. And you do that so you can catch these wanderers like this. We're in the middle of mating season. The males are doing a lot of traveling,
and you got to cover a lot of different avenues. And when you look at a dam face like this, there's so many options where they can cross, especially with the ice. It's a whole lot easier to get them on the trails before they get to the dam and they shoot off across the ice, and you don't know where they're going to come off. So if you can come into a spot like this, I think I've got, I think maybe 11 snares in here, I think is what it is. And you can cover every trail that comes in here, and they're going to come in here on these trails to this dam, and the dam is the focal point because it narrows everything down, but you still have to narrow the trails down to figure out where exactly you want your trap. And I've got the traps where I've had them in the past and I've done pretty well with them there, but you get a lot higher percentage of your catch on a spot like this if you set these trails. And I know one coyote isn't a lot, but in 3 days we picked up this one coyote here, and that's just one check, you know. So hopefully it'll continue to produce coyotes like this, and look for spots like this. And like I mentioned before, it doesn't matter that it's wide open prairie here. If you've got timber, you can do the same thing in the timber with the dam grade, because you still got a dam. That dam is still the focal point. Look for the deer trails or the cattle trails, depending upon the environment you're trapping in, and load those trails up with snares and collect the fur that's traveling down those trails. I mean, you've got the opportunity to catch the fox, the coyote, the bobcat. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can catch in these snares, and they'll be here waiting for you. So we're gonna go ahead and get up here, and I'll show you a little bit closer this coyote, and then we'll redo the set and see if there's anything else in here. All right, guys, this is that coyote we had in a snare here on that trail. I did a little bit of looking around here, and it looks like this is the only coyote we've got in a snare here. It's starting to rub a little bit. We're getting late in the year. It's about time to call her quits, but it's a decent coyote. Looks like a female, and just a nice tight spot. Great place to set a snare for these animals. And just look for this stuff on your trap line, guys. Snares are so quick and easy to put in. You can really add a lot of fur to the bottom line at the end of the year. And you know, a guy's got, you know, say there's 11 snares in here, but say a dozen. You know, a dozen snares cost you $20, and you know, one coyote pays for that, and then the rest are definitely adding to your bottom line. For a pretty low expense. So definitely look into these snares and look for these nice tight spots. Alright, guys, as you can see, we've got ourselves another coyote here in a snare. This is a great situation here. We've got a pretty major drainage running behind us here. And this is just a little feeder trail, and you can see in the footage here, it's just a faint trail that's coming out of this major drainage. And I saw that when I was coming through here, and I think it was an old deer trail, and I thought, well, I'll put a snare here because they'll use this trail to come out of that drainage. They don't like busting through this old sweet clover here. They want to use the trail. It's an easier path for them to use, and so look for those trails coming out of this country. And guys, this is big wide open country here that I'm dealing with, but even you guys that are dealing with timbered areas, the same rules still apply. You know, this country, whether it's open or whether it's got trees on it, it's still got trails through it. Find those key trails that come out of that country where they intersect a road, because this trail comes right out on a trail road going through here. And the same principles applies. You find those deer trails and snare in them. If you're not snaring on a real steep incline, you're not going to risk snaring that deer. On a real steep incline or decline, I would shy away from those when you're snaring on deer trails. But if you've got a deer stop, or if you have a breakaway snare, go ahead and snare in those deer trails, with the exception of those real steep inclines and declines, and you'll capture these coyotes. Unfortunately, this coyote definitely has mange setting on in the shoulders, but it's still an animal that we can harvest glands out of. Definitely still have a use for it. But I just wanted to show you this set here. It's one that, you know, it just takes a couple of minutes to put in, and then you just drive by and check it right from the window of the pickup and keep on rolling. And then when you've got a catch, you know, you get out. It's 30 yards from the pickup. Take care of the coyote real quick. This one's still alive, and so we'll shoot this coyote, and then I'm going to put that snare back in just right inside the brush here, as you'll see. So hopefully we'll be able to capture another one. I haven't looked yet to see if this is a female or a male, but with the mating season going on, I'm hoping it's a female, and that'll draw a male coyote into this area hopefully. About a half a mile down the trail, I had just harvested a male coyote out of a leg hold, and so hopefully this is a female. That's what I'm hoping for here. All right, guys, this is a great situation here for snaring coyotes. What we had, it's a little hard to tell at this point in time because he's got the ground all tore up here, but we had a real narrow path that was coming underneath the fence, and I took a snare here and I used the bottom rung of barbed wire to hang that snare support off of, and then just hooked the snare onto the top rung of the barbed wire with a quick link. And normally what happens in this situation is they'll actually take this quick link, it'll slide down the barbed wire to the nearest fence post, and then they'll tangle around the fence post and die there. But for some reason this guy just fought this snare right here where he got caught, and which is fine. It's just you know, as far as reusing the spot here, we won't be able to reuse this location again because he's got the grass all beat down. There's no way to narrow the fence. I will show you you know, kind of where the snare would go if we were to be able to reset this. But this is a nice pale coyote here that we got in the fence. One thing I do want to touch on when you are snaring in the fence is be very aware of where the deer are using it for crossing and where the coyotes are using it for crossing. Look at the barbed wire, and you can tell what kind of hair is on the barbed wire, whether it's deer or coyote, because you really don't want to target those areas where the deer are using it mainly to cross. And if it is a spot where the deer are crossing, a lot of times you can fence that down with sticks, you know, further out, and they won't crawl through the barbed wire. Or you can take this bottom rung, leave it low to the ground where the coyote's crawling through, and maybe take a piece of 9-gauge wire and tie the center strand of barbed wire off to the top and open it up a little bit so they go through that strand so you don't catch any deer. This is a place here where there's a lot of deer hunting going on, paid deer hunting, and you definitely don't want to be accidentally catching deer here. But this is a great spot to put a snare. As you can see, this cable is completely wound up. I mean, he just circled and circled and circled here and bound this wire tight. And it's kind of neat, you know, these barbed wire fences, they will, you know, they'll pull them down like this so they're completely tight like this. But it doesn't tend to break the barbed wire. And then when you cut the cable off, that barbed wire will pop back, you know, to its original height, and there's no issue as far as having to do any fencing after you catch a coyote. But you do need to be aware when you're snaring in a pasture with cattle. I mean, just think, it's taking this barbed wire and it's winding it down to here. Those cows can step over this fence. So A, you got to be aware of the cattle that are in there so you're not catching cattle. And B, you need to be aware of, you know, if you're allowed to snare in cattle and you feel safe doing that, please be aware of the opportunity for those cattle to get out. You may cause yourself some issues. So, so we've got our coyote out of the snare here. We're going to go ahead and cut that off his neck here. All right, we've got our snare off. And guys, if we were going to reset this spot here,
I just want to go over real quick the distance that you want that snare off the ground there. All right guys, we'd take that quick link and we would hook that up here on top, the top rung of the barbed wire, and then we would grab our snare. And remember, you know, to check your local regs, you know, whether you can have entanglement when you're snaring or not. We can here in South Dakota, which is, I think, a great deal as far as dispatching coyotes. But we would hang this snare off this bottom rung of barbed wire, and we're going to get 3 or 4 fingers in here. Don't set the snare on the ground. You don't want it on the ground. You want it up off the ground a little bit because they're not going to rub their chin on the ground when they're going through. So leave this snare up off the ground a little bit so that you're getting that good head catch. And don't make too big a loop here, because what you don't want is you don't want him getting his front arm through there. He has a lot of power when he gets that front arm through there. We want him by the neck. So don't make your loop overly large here on a crawl through situation. So, but like I said, we're not going to reset this spot because there's no way to narrow it down now with all the grass beat down. I do have 3 other snares in the fence line here, so we still have opportunities to capture coyotes here. But we're going to pick up our gear here, take our coyote, and head on down the trail. Hopefully we got some more. All right, now guys, we've got ourselves a nice coyote here. As you can see, we've got him in a snare here, and this coyote is caught in a dispatch snare, and that they typically kill them, and it allows you to get away with using this thinner cable. But what we've got here is I'm actually on a creek here, and it's frozen obviously, and I noticed that the coyotes really started running this creek. So I came down here and I looked for some narrow spots on here where I could narrow them down a little bit more with some brush. And as you can tell, it looks pretty wide open right here, right now. But when we're done here, we'll narrow this down so there's just a path here. You can see right here, this is where my snare support was at in the ice. And it's going to be going this way. The snare will end up hanging right here. And the nice thing about the ice, guys, is you can take an old wolf fang driver. That's what I use. I take one that's been used and beat up a little bit, and the bottom is wore quite a bit where the notches are. And then you can bend that 9-gauge wire, stick it around your wolf fang driver, stick it in the slots, pound it down in the ice, pull your driver out, and you've got a great spot for your snare support. And with that, you know, as it gets cold and the water comes up a little bit, it freezes in there solid, and you can use that again and again and again. It'll typically always be there, and it's just a great place to put a snare. We'll go ahead and cut this guy out of here. We'll just cut the cable here, and when we get back to the truck, we'll cut it off its neck. But one thing I want to talk about here is how this snare has been secured to the side here. This one, I believe, I actually tied it off. It's on a snare extension. It's on a snare extension. And then this snare is actually tied off to a bigger tree down the creek here. I actually have him on, he's on about 10 feet of cable plus the actual length of the snare. So there's quite a little room for that coyote to move in here, which is great because it creates an entanglement situation where they're definitely going to die, and we don't have to worry about a chew off or anything. But it looks like a pretty good coyote. You know, one downside to trapping on the ice is they freeze to the ice when they die. That's another reason I typically like to use a
an extension, because a lot of times it allows them to get up off the ice and actually entangle up on the bank and die up on the bank versus dying on the ice like this and melting down. And we actually had a warmer day yesterday where the creek probably actually got a little warm. There's still snow casing on it, but it got a little warmer, plus the heat of the animal, they freeze down to the ice a little bit. So we may lose a little bit of hair on this coyote when we pull him up, but we do have a good dead coyote right here. And that's what we're looking for. So got my snare box here, and I always take all the parts from my snares and I put them in my snare box because I can reuse those when I rebuild snares here in the spring. But we'll get this coyote pulled off of the ground here. A nice sized animal though. Now what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to redo our location here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a snare out of the box here. I like to loop these together. They're in dozen packs here, but we'll grab one snare out of there. And this was about the narrowest spot on the creek. I typically like to set 2 or 3 snares in a row. There was actually another coyote track that come down the ice here that we didn't have an opportunity at because I only had the one snare in the ice here, but it just really doesn't allow for another snare without hauling a tree down here and really jamming up the creek here. And I just don't have any big debris real close by, so we'll just set the one snare here. We'll cable those back up, set them in, and now what we're going to do, being as we've caught one here and we're putting a new snare onto this extension, we're just going to go ahead and grab a quick link, and we're going to grab our swivel on the snare. We're going to put our quick link through our swivel, grab the end of our extension and just clasp that off to there to hold it. So now we've got our snare secure. And now what we've got to do, guys, is this guy really he took all the debris that I had here to narrow this creek down, and he knocked it out of the way. So I'm going to gather some branches real quick here so we can narrow this back down. All right, now guys, as you can see, I've got this creek blocked off now, and what we've got here is this is going to be our hole that they travel through, but we've still got a hole right here that they can travel through, and I really want to direct them right through this spot. We don't want to leave any other open spots for these coyotes to go through. So what I've got is I've got the top of one of these willows, and if you break off the tops, they work really well. That's where they're the brushiest. And I'm going to grab that wolf fang driver again. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to punch a hole in the ice right here. Okay, now we've got our hole in the ice. Now we're going to take the top of our willow and we're going to ram that down in the ice there. And it looks like it belongs, kind of, guys. Coyotes don't seem to shy away from this. And I've had a real good success here. And it's a real easy way of narrowing it down. That's what this is. That's a willow that I put down through the ice. And now we've got this perfect opening here to put our snare in. And we're going to take our snare, which again, I'm using a dispatch snare here on a 5/64 cable. We've got our 9-gauge wire there. We've got our loop, nice round loop. And we're just going to center that right in the center of our opening. And now the next time a coyote comes through, he should walk right through that. I do have a little bit smaller loop on here, guys. We do have cats in this area, and they do travel the ice along with the coyotes. So I'm doing a smaller loop. If you do a big loop and you've got the cats coming through, they'll slink right through there and they won't get caught. So you definitely want to have a little bit smaller loop if you're targeting cats as well. And then you actually need to have it a little bit lower to the ground. I'm going to grab my fencing pliers here. For coyotes, I typically like to have it, you know, my fencing pliers and 3 fingers in there, and that seems to work really well. You know, this is kind of my reference for the bottom of a coyote snare, but we're in cat season now, and so I'm going to set this loop a little bit lower to the ground, a little bit smaller loop. We'll still have an opportunity to catch a coyote here. He may just blow through, we may miss him, but it would really be nice to pick up a couple of cats off this ice as well. So, and I've got more snares on the ice down this creek, so guys still have that opportunity to pick up those coyotes down there. So, but this is how simple it is, guys. It's really quick to put these snares in, and they're very effective at capturing these coyotes. Alright guys, we've got ourselves another nice coyote here snared in a dispatch snare. The reason I set this trail here is we've got a trail coming through the buckbrush that's cutting from one side of the creek to the other, and then it goes out into the open here, and then we've got a wheat stubble field further down to the south of us. And then I've also got a secondary snare over here, which is a side trail along the ice, and they've been running the ice here, and I wanted to cover that as well. And then I actually have a couple other snares further down on the ice to catch the travelers on the ice. So, you know, there's 4 or 5 snares right here. This is the only one that bagged this morning. He's been sitting out here. Yesterday we were pretty warm. We were in the 70s, which is kind of odd for January, but it doesn't look like he's slipping. It's a great neck catch here. And then he tangled it around his feet a little bit. And again, guys, this is a dispatch snare, and this snare did its job phenomenally today. Killed this coyote clean. No entanglement at all here. And then as far as anchoring device, what I've got is I've got about a 20-inch rebar stake that's put in the ground here, and then this is my 9-gauge support wire still sitting in the hole that I had it in before. I mean, this coyote, he didn't fight this snare long at all, which is very impressive. That quick kill was an awesome deal, and I mean, we're going to be able to reuse the same location again, and what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this snare off with a cable cutter, and I carry those in my box here, and we'll just cut this off up here at the swivel, and then we'll cut this off the coyote's neck right away, so that we don't have to deal with it later. But we've got that cable cut off, and we'll be able to reuse the parts again. The cable, of course, is shot because it's all bound up. Put our spare parts in here. We're going to go ahead and grab another dispatch snare. And then what we're going to do here, guys, is we're going to use a quick link to attach this to that other swivel, because we don't need to pull that rebar stake out of the ground. We're just going to leave it where it's at. It's secure. Unwind our snare. Go ahead and slide this through the swivel here. We're going to put it back on the swivel here. And this, guys, is a spot when I was driving along the edge of the creek that I actually saw coyote tracks using this trail. And that's one of the main reasons I set it, is because there was already active tracks here, and I figured they'd be back again to use it. So I set it, and these have been here for, I'm going to say, about a week. And it took about a week for this spot to bag a coyote, but well worth it. Coyotes are doing real well on price this year, and we want to capture every one of these western coyotes we can. Now we're going to grab our old snare support and remind you that this was still sitting in that old hole. So we're going to reuse that, pump it down in there again, pull our driver out. Actually, that hole might be a little loose. We're going to go into a new hole here. not a lot of brush, that's where we want that snare to sit. We want that coyote to be comfortable when he comes through here, sticking his head in there and avoiding debris in the opening of that snare is how we're going to do that. So we're going to take our cable, we're going to loop that back around the buck brush. We're going to bring our whammy over, stick that on the end of our 9-gauge wire. And then we're going to position our snare in the center of this opening, guys. And now that is very, very well blended in. And if you're not happy, you can tighten it off a little bit, you know, bend a piece of brush over here and blend it in a little bit more if you like, or you can leave it open. But we're going to scoot that over just a hair so we're centered in the opening. We don't want him sticking his nose over here and going around that snare, guys. We want him to stick his head right through. We want to make that opening clear so he can. And again, right now we're a little bit lower than I would like, but we've got this branch up on top that's going to force that coyote to put his nose down through that opening on the snare. So we'll be okay with that little bit lower snare here. And another reason I've got that snare lower to the ground here is we've got a decent incline here, and we don't want to snare a deer by the neck. So we're going to lower that snare down just a little bit. We're going to have that stick across the top, and hopefully that's enough to deter that deer from coming through this snare. So this location's done, guys. It's that quick. Takes me a couple more minutes to illustrate what we're doing here, but when you're running these snares, I mean, you can be in and out of here in a couple minutes. You know, once your stake's in the ground, you know your spot, and especially when you can reuse it. These dispatch snares, when it puts them down right away, a lot of times you can reuse that exact same spot again, and that's a great opportunity because you don't have to go up the trail any further or get off a location. So definitely look into those dispatch snares, and we're going to go ahead and get on down the trail and check some more equipment.
Got ourselves a real nice looking coyote in a snare. This is a snare that's just set in an old cow trail here that allows us a couple of different options here with what we're doing. Actually right behind the video camera there is another snare as well, and what we've got here is we've got a natural pinch point. We've got a 4-wire fence off to the north here, which is literally just a few feet away from me here. And then we've got the side hill that comes down and it congests everything to this point right here. And then we've got 2 cow trails that actually conjoin here into one, and it creates a great funnel point, to set in a couple of snares. There's a snare right behind the camera, and then I've got this snare here. These snares did take a couple of weeks to hit. There's not a lot of grass here. I was actually looking forward to not having a moon here. With some of these snares, you'll find that when you've got a lot of moonlight, I think they can see them a little better, and you'll have some runarounds where they run around the edge of them, or dodge them and go around. But when you don't have that moon, they can't see them as well, and those more obvious snares, which this was here, they'll go through. And you'll capture them on these dark nights like this. What this coyote is caught on, he's caught on it's a snare that I build with it's got a 9-gauge swivel on it, 3/32 cable, and a Sherlock. And when I'm using a non-dispatch type snare, I do use the 3/32 cable. I find that it holds up better. If I'm using a dispatch snare, which will actually be what I put back in this location, I'll use a 5/64 cable because it dispatches them quicker. They don't fight as long, and the animal is dispatched when you get there. So with what this coyote's done here, I mean, he's really kind of beat the grass down a little bit, but not horrible. the snare will actually put back in that same location because he really didn't knock down the grass as much as you'd think. It'll be enough for these dark nights to capture another coyote here, hopefully. And so we'll go ahead and dispatch this animal, and then we'll put the snare up in the same location. And what I'm going to do with that, guys, is I'm going to take a quick link, and I'll cut the cable after I dispatch the coyote. I'm going to quick link the new snare, the new swivel, to the swivel that's on that stake, so I don't have to pull that stake out of this frozen ground. I don't have a puller with me at this particular moment, so we'll put that dispatch snare in, which again is a 5/64 cable, and it's got a breakaway device on it. I believe it's at 280 pounds, so if a deer or something were to get caught, it would break at 280 pounds on the terminal end, and then that deer would be able to get away. And as you can see, he's relatively calm here at this time, but when I pulled up, he sure was fighting it. All right, guys, like I said, what we're going to do here is we're going to cut this cable off. And I do carry a pair of cable cutters with me in my snare box here, so I can, cut this cable. And we're going to save our whammy here. Just throw that in our snare box. And then another thing I want to talk about is the catch here. This is a perfect catch. We've got this coyote caught right around the neck, right where we want it to be. And this Sherlock, it does relax a little bit after they've been caught. So they're not typically dead if you don't have an entanglement system with the Sherlock. So that's one of the reasons I do really like using a dispatch snare, is because they don't release the animals dead, and you don't have as much cable damage. So we'll go ahead and cut this cable here off of the coyote. And then this is another part that we can reuse, is this lock when I rebuild snares in the spring. But we'll cut that lock out of there so we can reuse that. Throw the lock in there, and then this cable will go in the back of the truck, and I'll dispose of it when I get home. But we got a pretty nice coyote here. Nice big animal. One thing too, when you don't use a dispatch snare, is you'll get this water head on these coyotes, and it makes it a little more interesting when you're skinning and fleshing. One more reason to use a dispatch snare, if it's legal in your state, of course. We can use them here in South Dakota as long as we have that breakaway device on there. Cable here, we're going to make our loop. We've got our whammy here, and we're going to slide that on our 9-gauge wire. And guys, this is a situation here where we don't have a lot of grass right here, and it doesn't appear as though this would be a situation where a coyote would just willingly walk through this. But I'm here to tell you, on these dark nights, this will work. You'll catch a lot of coyotes like this. I've actually got a spot that I normally snare. There's still cattle in there this year, so I can't. But it's just a bare trail on the side of a draw, and there's no grass there, but it's a great trail. The coyotes use it all the time, and I'll normally put about 5 of these in a line there. And my best catch there in one day was 3 coyotes snared in an exact situation like this, where there's just not a lot of grass to blend this snare in. So even though there are some open areas, don't totally discount those. You can set a snare in an open area, and on these dark nights where there's no moon, you will catch coyotes in those snares. The downside is they're not real effective when there's a lot of moonlight, and they're definitely not effective during the day. But it's worth, that extra opportunity to pick up fur and put a couple snares out in those spots, and you will eventually catch coyotes there. It's one of those spots you're going to want to make sure you're there for 2 or 3 weeks, and you're not capturing that full moon, because you won't catch them then. But just to be able to pick up a triple in wide open country is a pretty great opportunity. It's a lot of fur that you add at the end, a lot of fur that you add at the end of the year. So look for those spots where they're high travel ways. Even though the grass cover isn't that great, you can still pick up some coyotes in those areas.